Clashes within a historic city along Brazil's northeast coast over progress and protecting the past. I'm Elaine Reyes in Washington, D.C., and this is America's Now. First up, an old port city in Brazil becomes a setting for a hostile showdown. Its land may be developed into a luxury apartment complex, displacing residents.
I am not going to lose my house. I am fighting not to lose it, because it's where I live and work.
Your house was down this way?
Correspondent Jerry Haddon reports on the rising tensions of Recife and the debate over public and private spaces. Then the 2016 Olympic Games are just weeks away, but is Rio de Janeiro ready?
I'm pretty sure we're going to see successful games. Rio is ready. We've been working very hard for 7 years.
We sit down with Sydney Levy, the CEO of the Olympic Organizing Committee, to assess the risks. And later, gymnastics will be one of the highlights of the Summer Olympics in Rio. For this week's Olympians segment, we introduce you to a gymnast hoping to both soar and score big at the Games. Welcome to the show. Along Brazil's most beautiful stretch of coastline, a battle is underway in Recife. It's known as the Venice of Brazil and was a host city during the 2014 World Cup. Conservationists are going up against developers, poor blacks against elites accused of trying to take their land. The land in question, an old train yard named Estelita. The city wants to build high-rise condos there while protesters want public parks. The standoff has gone on for more than a year with several clashes that have sometimes turned violent. CCTV's Jerry Haddon reports on the struggle for the soul of a city.
Aqui foi o local onde a gente entrou, né, no dia 21 de junho de 2014. A gente ocupou essa área, que era uma área do governo federal, que foi leiloada sob circunstâncias suspeitas.
A Recife housing activist who goes only by Doro shows us Estelita, the huge swath of abandoned city land that he and hundreds of others briefly called home.
You guys lived here?
Sim, por mês.
How did you all get inside every day to live here?
Os primeiros dias a gente quebrou essa janela, entrou por aqui.
And now they've boarded it all up. You can't get in this way.
Foi a primeira coisa que eles fizeram.
So there's still a way in though, huh?
Aqui é o trilho. Essa linha férrea é a segunda mais antiga do país. E existe uma corrente dentro do movimento que quer tombar esse patrimônio, tanto as linhas quanto o pátio ferroviário. Esses armazéns, eles estocavam açúcar.
So this was the train yard?
Sim, sim.
A train yard, a storage warehouse for colonial-era sugar, and today a protected historical site, or so people thought, until 2 years ago. That's when bulldozers showed up to tear the place down.
Why did you guys come in here and take over this place?
Ela surgiu a partir da demolição de uma parte desses armazéns de açúcar. Um integrante, ele viu e veio e tentou entrar por aqui por trás para filmar e foi agredido pelos seguranças. A partir daí, a notícia, ele mandou as fotos e as pessoas começaram a chegar na noite que ele foi agredido.
What's wrong with the government coming in and tearing this place down? It was empty anyway, right?
Esse é um debate central, né, da gente, porque essa área tão grande está abandonada. Para a sociedade, eles passam a necessidade de se fazer alguma coisa aqui. Mas na realidade, essa área ela é abandonada propositalmente.
The city's plan to build luxury high-rise apartment towers here, with shops, parking, a pool, and unfettered views of the sea. But to get that view, the tall buildings would block it from these folks, just inland from Estelita. This is Colque, a tightly packed neighborhood of mostly poor and working-class Brazilians. They're up in arms over the Estelita project, for the lost views and more. Residents along this road adjacent to Estelita stand to lose their homes. The city wants to widen the street. For the traffic, the new condos would create. Lucia Lima has lived here her whole life.
Essa mudar aqui, como eu sou moradora e sou beneficiada, faz 20 e poucos anos que eu moro aqui, eu gosto muito daqui, eu não pretendo sair. E se tiver alguma abaixo-assinada, alguma coisa que possa lutar contra, eu vou lutar. Porque não é justo.
Não é justo.
Não é justo.
Nor does she believe the state's promise to build her a new home. Why? Just ask any number of neighbors, including this hairdresser and mother of two named Valdemarta.
Your house was down this way?
É isso que aconteceu aqui agora. E a minha casa era em cima do canal mesmo. Bom, João.
Last year, the city tore down Valdemarta's house to make way for this sewage canal that will also serve Estelita. She wasn't opposed to the project, she says, just how they did it. Officials gave her 3 days warning to pack up and move out. They didn't offer her a place to go, until she raised a ruckus. The city eventually coughed up this subsidized place nearby. Valdemarta works on the ground floor, lives upstairs. She still bristles at how she says she was treated.
Na verdade, a gente iniciou com assembleias na praça, Arthur Barreto Júnior, e a gente foi para o Ministério Público para pedir a esse órgão que o Ministério viesse a monitorar a maneira como eles vinham nos tratando, né, de maneira nazista, né? Eles dizem que não estão preocupados com a sua moradia, eles simplesmente querem concluir a obra.
Valdemarta says she fought for a housing stipend and got it, but it isn't enough.
Não, a minha luta não acabou. A gente tem que estar sempre provocando o governo, sempre abrindo pautas de audiências públicas no Ministério Público para rever, porque se a gente não for não acompanhar esse processo, ele vai ser arquivado. Como o de todas as famílias que estão nesse déficit de 70 mil famílias no Recife.
The tensions in Colque and over Estelita come at a crucial time for Recife. It is one of the big cities that retains its old world charm, its mix of rich and poor, its relatively low skyline. But city planning official Antonio Alejandro says it's time for a change. Alejandro shows off the Estelita development plan. The world over, he says, old port cities like Recife must eventually get facelifts. Look at Bilbao in Spain, he says, or Boston.
Recife está diante de desafio que é global, que é de repensar o modelo de desenvolvimento das cidades, buscando garantir a dinâmica econômica. Os empreendedores imobiliários enxergam de uma forma o processo de desenvolvimento. Aqueles setores que têm uma visão mais preservacionista buscam conservar de uma forma mais intensa. E dessa relação entre essas forças que se planta o desafio de construir um projeto que represente um consenso possível para o modelo de desenvolvimento.
But mistrust runs high in Brazilian society. Alejandro says he gets why people doubt the city's plan to make Estelita more public and to house the people it displaces.
Wouldn't it just make sense to focus the city resources on procuring housing first before spending all the much larger sum on the actual public works?
Essa deve ser o objetivo. O que se persegue é esse tipo de eficácia.
It's just a simple switch of priorities, or am I wrong?
Nós temos um país que historicamente teve o poder público orientado muito mais para o atendimento dos segmentos mais privilegiados da sociedade, não tornando, né, prioridade o atendimento daquelas camadas que são exatamente as que mais precisam da presença do poder público.
Case in point, the new Pernambuco Stadium outside Recife, one of Brazil's great white elephants, a World Cup soccer venue built in the middle of nowhere for a one-time tournament. It made contractors rich with taxpayer money. Now it sits essentially abandoned, except for Carlos.
E vim aqui porque eu gosto muito de automodelismo, né? Que é carrinho controle remoto. Uns dizem que é hobby, outros dizem que é esporte.
And is this parking lot good place to do that?
Já 2 vezes que eu venho aqui, 2 vezes, e vi que esse espaço aqui, essa pista é muito boa também para andar.
And speaking of sports, how is the stadium working out?
Muitos dizem que foi um elefante branco, mas eu acredito que para algumas pessoas trouxe benefício também. Por exemplo, para mim, trouxe bastante benefício. Eu posso vir aqui, brincar com o meu carro, que eu posso até aprender, assim, na verdade, eu já sei dirigir, né?
$200 million for a glorified parking lot. It's no wonder people are suspicious of land grabs and speculators, say residents in Muribeca, half an hour from Recife. Muribeca is home to, well, there used to be a lot more people living here. 4 years ago, the wrecking cranes rolled in. The city said scores of these apartment blocks were built with bad cement. Some were cracking. Charles Enrique, a metal worker and inventor, was among those evicted. Since then, Muribeca has become like a ghost town. Those who stayed nearby still wait for the new homes the government promised.
A maioria da minha vida eu morei aí no prédio. Para mim foi muito triste sair do meu lar. Aqui no Conjunto Muribeca é muito calmo. Você pode ver que crianças ainda brincam no meio da rua, a gente joga bola. E ser criança aqui foi maravilhoso, foi maravilhoso. Minha mãe faleceu porque, assim, esse negócio de tirar a gente dos blocos, aí ela teve um ataque fulminante.
Oh, you still have the key. Can you tell us about the day when you got the eviction notice?
Assim, me lembrar desse dia é como se fosse... O dia que colocaram o papel na porta aí, a gente ficou, o prédio, o bloco todo, né? As pessoas todas que moravam aqui, a gente ficou, assim, sei lá, aéreo, com incerteza do que seria o futuro da gente. Mas o morador fez uma sala de janta, o quarto da filha dele. E aqui era o quarto do casal.
Enrique thinks none of this had to happen, that most of the blocks were fine. He says the state bank behind the demolitions just wants to raise them to rebuild something like at Estelita, something for rich people as Recife expands. Especially because the bank has said it must tear down surrounding houses too, houses in perfect condition. It says they're too close to the condemned buildings. In Muribeca, they don't buy it, and they're fighting back, holding protests.
Eu peço a cada morador, a cada comerciante, que lute pelo que é seu. Não caiam, não deixe a Caixa, não deixe a Prefeitura, não deixe o Ministério Público, porque esse pedaço de chão é nosso. Lutem, lutem, não deixem Caixa, não deixe governo, não deixe ninguém tirar o que é de vocês.
These days, the protests off one another, and the tensions run high. In Recife, a riot policeman shot one protester at an Estelita march, apparently for accidentally knocking his hat off. And in the build-up to Carnival, these downtown activists dress as skyscrapers. Then they block traffic and people's views. All these protests have caught the attention of Brazil's federal police. They've opened an investigation into the sale of the Estelita land. Investigator Andrea Pinho says something there stinks.
É o valor mínimo, entendeu? Que eles estipulam. E nisso já tem uma outra irregularidade, porque foi feita uma avaliação do terreno, previu um valor de mercado e previu dois outros valores. Um valor 15% abaixo e o valor mínimo. E quando foi para leilão, em vez do leiloeiro começar com o bem solicitando o valor de mercado, ele botou o valor intermediário, que já estava 15% inferior ao valor de mercado.
After all this investigating that you've done, do you agree with that movement that took place last year, the people taking over the land trying to stop this development project?
Minha posição é que deve ser dado algum destino para aquele terreno, porque hoje em dia é um terreno simplesmente abandonado. Se puder ser um destino público, que as pessoas possam aproveitar, até porque é uma localização privilegiada, seria o mais interessante. O poder público, que deveria zelar pelo interesse público, costuma cuidar mais dos interesses privados do que do público.
Money talks.
Aqui no Brasil, então, ele grita.
Urban activists insist their fight isn't just over how high the bricks go. It's about people, life, on the street, real culture, like this year's carnival in Olinda, a town just a short drive from Recife. Etania, one of the skyscraper street protesters, has come out to enjoy the music and dance. She says Recife, and even cities in other countries, still have a chance to regain this sort of authenticity.
Isso a gente vê porque é a linha do térreo, é a linha da rua, onde as casas se comunicam com a rua. A rua está cheia de pessoas. Para mim, assim, é uma coisa indescritível, me emociona muito. Onde a gente vê isso no Recife? Onde as praças estão sendo proibidas das pessoas desfrutarem de lazer. Aqui a praça é aberta, tem grade. Uma violência em relação à cultura. São demonstrações, manifestações culturais impostas de fora, esquecendo, apagando a cultura local.
Those forces got the Estelita squatters evicted last year. But who'd have thunk it? They're back now and celebrating.
Vai entrando.
Turns out Pino, the investigator from the federal police, got a judge to reverse the sale of the land. The investigation continues. No one knows what will happen to Estelita now. But for the moment, with gentrification on hold and a landmark spared, life's a party.
Estelita remains in limbo today. Activists hope to bring more attention to their cause when the Olympic torch passes through town.
Coming up.
Overcoming obstacles in time for the Olympics.
Well, Rio just started the winter months. So Rio is now in cooler temperatures. And everybody knows that the mosquitoes, they don't survive in cooler temperatures. So I think it's a mistake for any athlete to say they're not going to Rio because of Zika.
America's Now.
Welcome back to America's Now. The 2016 Summer Olympics are set to begin in Rio de Janeiro on August 5th. However, with Brazil mired in the worst economic recession it's seen in decades, the host city is experiencing a host of problems. Polluted waters, rising crime, and public safety concerns are a few of the obstacles, along with fiscal difficulties. In fact, the situation has been so dire, it forced Rio's governor to declare a state of emergency and request federal aid. I had the chance to speak with Sidney Levy, the CEO of the Rio Olympic Organizing Committee here in Washington, and I asked him how Rio de Janeiro is addressing these and other challenges in the days before the Olympic Games. Take a listen. Mr. Levy, thank you so much for joining us on America's Now.
Thank you for having me.
Is Rio ready for the Games? There have been concerns about the water in Guanabara Bay, the Zika virus. infrastructure delays. Do you think we will see a successful Games?
I'm pretty sure we're going to see successful Games. Rio is ready. We've been working very hard for 7 years. We made a huge investment. We trained thousands of people. People are already working today. We run test events. We tested 50 sports in the competition area that are going to happen. We tested the transportation systems. It's just that the amount of scrutiny that the Games get is just incredible. So everybody wants to see, everybody wants to know what's happening. So every little thing kind of being exploded in the media. But we're pretty sure that's going to happen and it's going to be a success with the special flavor of the Brazilian people.
That being said, there is always that scrutiny. The same questions come up anytime any city hosts the Olympic Games, is that right?
Yes.
But you mentioned investment. How much has been spent on these Rio Games? We saw 2 years ago with the World Cup, Brazil spent about $1 billion. That's a lot of money. So what are we seeing here as far as money with Rio?
It's very important to understand the distinction between two budgets. First budget's $8 billion for infrastructure, and it's basically spent on public transportation. There's new highways, new subway lines, new buses, like new trains, new light trains. And this $8 billion will spend for something that's going to be used by the population after the Games. They're going to stay. That's the legacy of the Games. The second budget, and this is basically funded by government money, by taxpayers' money. The second budget, which is the operations of the Games, which is around $2.5 billion, it's all private money. It's sponsorships, it's selling tickets, licensing deals, television rights. So this is separate sources, different ways to spend that money. And it's very important for people to do not mix those two. So during the World Cup, these things were mixed up. We don't like that. We took a different approach. It's easier for the people to understand where this money is coming from. So the government money, the taxpayers' money is going for things that's going to stay after the Games. People are going to be able to use it forever. And the other budget, which is the private money, goes for the show, for running the Games, put them to work, making it beautiful. So it's two different things.
So would you say it's even fair to compare the World Cup and Brazil as a whole hosting the World Cup versus Rio hosting the Olympic Games?
We learned with the Olympic Games a lot of things. For example, we learned how to make that distinction. We learned security. We learned how to secure the place, how to use the security forces. We learned a lot of things in the Olympics. But it's very different because the World Cup is spread across the country. And the Olympic Games are all in the same place. We had around 600 athletes in the World Cup. We have 12,000 athletes in the Olympic Games. Then we have the Paralympic Games just afterward. It's a much larger period of time. So it's different efforts. We learned something. There's things we're doing differently. For example, we have been very worried about not delivering any white elephant, things that are not being used after. So our arenas are smaller or temporary. We didn't build any single big arena that can be commercially used afterwards. So we did that, and we learned that in a way with the World Cup.
One of the biggest concerns that has been the Zika virus. Rio has the second highest number of Zika cases in the entire country. We've already heard that Irish golfer Rory McIlroy will pull out of the Games. What would you tell to the athletes and the fans that are coming to Rio who are concerned about Zika?
Well, Rio just started the winter months. So Rio is now in cooler temperatures, and everybody knows that the mosquitoes, they don't survive in cooler temperatures. So I think it's a mistake for any athlete to say they're not going to Rio because of Zika, because the curves show very clearly that this number is very high in February, March, and then starts to go down. And today, we have, at the organizing committee, 4,000 people working. They're working around the city, and there's not a single case of Zika, not a single case of Zika among 4,000 people working there. So I don't see really any threat for the athletes, as it is clear that in the winter months, Zika is not a threat. The mosquitoes do not proliferate in cooler.
Zika has just been one of the major concerns. As we know, Brazil has been going through a lot of economic and political turmoil. Dilma Rousseff has been pushed aside. There's an interim president now. Did you ever think or worry that the Olympic Games could either be postponed or moved to another city?
No, I don't think it's going to happen. This is not going to happen. I think, on the contrary, I think the Games is an opportunity to unify the country, to show that it's possible to have in the same building living opposites, the Israelis and the Palestinians living together. So that's the Olympics all about. You know? It's a demonstration that peace is possible. And I think that would be a wonderful moment for Rio to show to the Brazilian people that it's absolutely possible and necessary to unify the country. So stop that fighting and that doesn't go anywhere, and unify in one single message. So we are not afraid at all of postponing or anything like that, because we think we have the right message.
How are ticket prices, tickets available for fans? Are they selling? There was also some concerns that the stadiums won't be full, people would not travel to Rio. Tourism in Brazil did not increase as was expected following the World Cup. 3.5 million people around the world, billion people around the world watched the World Cup on television. So what are your thoughts? Are there any concerns that you won't have any attendance?
Yeah, we sold already 70% of the tickets sold. The 30% who didn't sell, 50% of those, 15% of the total, are the football cities that's not in Rio, which is a surprise for us, because Brazilians, they love football. We were expecting the tickets of football to be sold very quickly. They were not. And, but we're using the torch relay around the country. Every time the torch goes in a different city, we then make a campaign of selling tickets, and they're starting to sell. The other 15% that are not selling, our sports are very unpopular. People don't really understand. So we're running a campaign to educate the people what are those sports. The sports are simply not popular in Brazil. And then there's a lot of preliminary games, but all the top tickets been sold, and it's another funny thing is the tickets that are not sold are the cheapest tickets. We have $20 tickets. We can buy it in 4 installments of $5 each, and those tickets are not sold yet. So we think last minute they will be sold.
As we get closer to the games, just a few weeks out now, what are some of the last minute challenges? What are some of the issues that you're trying to tie up?
The largest challenge is that we deal with hundreds and thousands of parts, the transportation, the food, the accommodation, the security, all this. And we never had the chance to test all working at the same time. So really, to be in the first day that they're going to see everybody, it's around 300,000 people working together. And this coordination, we tested every one of those parts, but we have never been able to test everybody together at the same time. And this would just happen in the first day. That's why in every game, the first day is the most difficult. So that's the one that's really worrying me right now. But I'm pretty confident the people are ready, and we're willing. And the population in Brazil in general are very favorable for the games. We have 70% approval rate, which is by far bigger than London or other cities. And we think when everybody gets together, it's going to be a beautiful party.
Mr. Sidney Levy, thank you so much for joining us on America's Now.
Thank you.
The federal government granted approval for Rio's request for a financial bailout. The cost, $850 million.
Coming up.
From Mexico, watch the rise of Alexa Moreno.
I've been dreaming of participating in the Olympic Games since I was a little girl.
America's Now.
Welcome back to America's Now. A young gymnast from Mexico is our featured athlete on our special Olympian segment. Gymnastics is one of the most competitive sports in the Games and one of the most fun to watch. It requires strength, agility, and absolute precision. And Alexa Moreno has fulfilled her dreams by vaulting her way into the Rio Games. Alexa is this week's Olympian.
La gimnasia artística es un deporte que tiene de todo: flexibilidad, coordinación, fuerza, velocidad, pero es para personas valientes. Necesitas ser valiente, dedicado y tener como mucha voluntad y perseverancia. Yo la verdad no paro hasta llegar. Entonces siempre así como que sigo hasta que logro lo que en verdad quiero. Y yo creo que esa es mi máxima motivación. Yo llegué a hacer gimnasia pues cuando era muy chiquita. Empecé creo que un poquito antes de los 3 y mi mamá fue la que, pues mis papás fueron los que decidieron, ¿no? Que porque tenía mucha energía y siempre estaba pues por ahí colgada donde no. Pues empezamos a las 8, trotar, calentamiento, hacemos una serie de abdominales de media hora y después hacemos ya la fuerza, la cuerda, flexiones, abdominales en las espalderas y bueno, otro bonche de ejercicios. Y después de eso ya vamos a los aparatos, que son como 30 minutos por aparato más o menos, barras, viga, salto. El cuerpo te duele y dices tú, ya no puedo, o sea, de verdad. Bueno, a mí me pasa que digo yo, aquí voy a caer de cabeza, ya no me dan las piernas, no. Sí, estaba momentos que digo yo, ¿por qué tengo que seguir? O sea, lo vale de verdad. Luego digo yo, claro que lo vale, casi inmediatamente, ¿no? Pero eso es lucha interna. Entonces, simplemente tienes que mantenerte firme y tratar de en esos momentos así como que ya relajarte o algo para que luego al día siguiente puedas otra vez. Yo creo que en esos momentos es cuando se distinguen los que siguen en esto o simplemente lo dejan. Desde chica, desde que yo creo que supe que existían Juegos Olímpicos, ya era así como que, ay, quiero estar ahí. Y pues yo creo que eso es lo que me ha mantenido ahí. Los Juegos Olímpicos para mí son el evento más grande que hay en el deporte. Hacer algo importante en Juegos Olímpicos es algo que nunca nadie olvida, nunca se olvida y quedan registrados para siempre. No me lo podía creer que hubiera logrado algo tan grande, o sea, algo que has estado luchando desde tanto tiempo, entonces todavía de hecho no me cae así como el 20, ¿no?
Creo que estamos cada vez mejor preparados. Creo que antes la meta realmente era clasificar a unos Juegos Olímpicos y participar, hacer el recorrido del Estadio Olímpico en la inauguración, tener la experiencia olímpica. Ahora creo que hemos llegado a un nivel y hemos trabajado para llegar a un nivel en donde ya los gimnastas pueden no solamente participar, sino competir.
Pues Alexa es una gimnasta que yo definiría como de potencia, ¿no? Muy potente y con mucha explosividad, ¿no? Es muy fuerte y es bastante completa también en todos los aparatos, ¿no? Ha trabajado para ello. Ha realizado durante este ciclo un trabajo muy fuerte. Ha vencido obstáculos muy importantes, lesiones, fatigas y bueno, eso ha dado el resultado de su clasificación, ¿no?
Lo que quiero hacer en Juegos Olímpicos en realidad es verme bien, o sea, hacer mi competencia segura, estable, es lo primero. Y después es entrar en la final de salto. Esa es mi meta ahorita. Una medalla en Juegos Olímpicos es solo en la vida de todo deportista. Para empezar, me convertiría así como en la primera gimnasta mexicana en ganar una medalla en Juegos Olímpicos. Y eso no tiene precio. México le hace falta como demostrar que se puede, porque muchas veces dicen, es que los mexicanos no son buenos, pues. Entonces, el estar ahí dando y lograr cosas que nadie jamás ha hecho es algo que siento que le ayuda mucho a las personas de la nación. Entonces, yo creo que eso también es algo que estoy esperando hacer, poder dejar cosas buenas para los que vienen.
When she's not practicing or competing, Alexa studies architecture. She wants to build gymnastics workout facilities one day.
Coming up.
Protecting Patagonia from some unruly rodents.
Lamentablemente eso nos ha...
They have no natural predator here. That leaves it up to us humans to become the predators.
Es la etapa que nos queda, pues lamentablemente...
America's Now.
Welcome back. At the southern tip of the Americas, you'll find one of the only privately owned nature reserves in the world. Caroquinca Park lies in Chile's Patagonia. It is 300,000 hectares of raw wilderness and is home to more than 100 native species. Full of natural resources, it could have faced a different fate a decade ago had it not been for a major public-private partnership. It is thriving but faces some new challenges. Correspondent Harris Whitbeck takes us there.
It is early on a cold Sunday morning. Mauricio Chacon and fellow park rangers start the day repairing a water pump at a nearby stream.
Mecánico, carpintero, panadero, de todo un poco.
Back at their base, his wife Francisca, also a ranger, bakes bread. She uses water, flour, and yeast, a recipe that has changed little in hundreds of years. Mauricio and Francisca have lived in the Caroquinca private reserve surrounded by the harsh natural beauty of Tierra del Fuego for 10 years. They lead a group of rangers who spend weeks at a time patrolling hundreds of thousands of acres. They live together as a family, sharing the joys and the frustrations of life here. Committed to one of the largest private preservation projects in the world. Theirs is a life of daily chores, of glorious hikes, of isolation. As winter looms ahead, they prepare to stockpile firewood. Soon, these lands will be under meters of snow.
Pero sí es impresionante que uno cree que estando en pleno siglo XXI...
Leña.
Leña.
Sí. Es que tenemos muchos canchones que de hecho te los voy a mostrar ahora y la idea de nosotros es aprovecharlo, ya que alguien los taló, nosotros aprovecharlo. Para que no se pudran sin dar algún tipo de utilidad, ya que están ahí. Sí.
Y todo esto es, o sea, ustedes no cortan árboles que caen...
No, estos son canchones. Canchones se le llama donde agruparon vigas cortadas. Y están ahí que no se pudieron procesar y nos tuvo que decir aquí tienes leña para nosotros como para 10 años.
¿Hace cuánto fue que esto pasó de ser tierra de dotación forestal a ser un parque?
Sí, en septiembre del 2004 aproximadamente se pasó ya de la parte que era forestal, o sea, el banco entregó esto a WSS, que somos nosotros, Wildlife Conservation Society. Conservación, educación, investigación, que son como las 3 aristas importantes de nosotros. Claro, yo llegué en enero del 2005, llegué como 4 meses después de la fundación del parque. Y ahora estoy a pasos de cumplir ya 11 años. Familia. Claro, o sea, es un chiste, pues yo vine por 3 meses.
¿Ah, sí?
Yo venía de otro rubro, vine por 3 meses, como quien dice, a trabajar en algo, a relajarme un poco, a estar en Tierra del Fuego, que es mi lugar de crecimiento y todo. Y voy a cumplir 11 años y ya no quiero irme.
Son los 3 meses más
Sí, de 3 meses pasé 11 años y sigue. Y ojalá sean unos 10 o 15 años más. Pretendo jubilarme acá y hacer otras cosas.
Sí, es que es la tierra bendita.
Sí, obviamente, Tierra del Fuego. Inexplorada, pero hermosa.
Sí. Bueno, vamos a conocerla.
Sí, vamos a conocerla.
They are driven by a deep love for the environment, a commitment to preserving the precious natural resources enshrined in Caroquinca. Much is at stake. The park is the home of one of the largest reserves of peat moss in the southern hemisphere. The unassuming plant that is responsible for trapping some 300 million tons of carbon dioxide a year. A quiet but effective weapon in the battle against climate change.
Mira lo que sucede con esto.
Sí, se va hasta abajo, ¿no? Sí. Y el carbono está atrapado más abajo.
Sí.
Sí.
The sponge-like moss, also used in other parts of the world to produce whiskey, can grow up to 10 meters below the earth. and it helps keep carbon dioxide from entering the atmosphere. As Caruquinca's administrative director, Bárbara Saavedra knows peat moss well.
Tú tienes que pensar en una turbera en dos niveles. En lo que uno ve en la superficie son los musgos que no son muy sexys aparentemente. Pero si uno hace un corte y se mete en el subsuelo, esto es un gran bolsón de materia orgánica en semidescomposición que se ha ido acumulando no por cientos, por miles de años. Y sobre cada año una capa nueva de musgo ha ido creciendo. Nosotros tenemos turberas aquí de más de 10 metros de profundidad. Entonces son verdaderos bolsones donde está capturado carbono de hace 10.000 años. Si esas turberas se rompen, ese carbono y todos los otros gases, en forma de distintos gases, se va a la atmósfera. Entonces, en el fondo las turberas son como el equivalente a un iceberg. Todo lo que uno ve en lo más pequeñito. La mayor parte de las turberas es invisible a los ojos. Eso es lo que hace la vegetación en todas partes del mundo. Toma carbono, CO2, y lo transforma en planta. Y esta es una planta particular que tiene las dos gracias, que es muy eficiente en capturar carbono, crece mucho y además lo deja en el suelo, dada la naturaleza del ecosistema. Porque mirar más allá de la especie en sí misma. Estas especies funcionan cuando están en sistemas integrados que están sanos. Y esa es una cosa que nosotros desde la visión humana nos cuesta ver. Nos cuesta ver el nivel sistémico. El valor de las turberas desde el punto de vista del calentamiento global es gigantesco. Las turberas tienen una pequeña superficie, cubren una pequeña superficie de la Tierra, un 3%, pero tienen más carbono acumulado que todo el carbono que está en la atmósfera hoy día. Se ha mantenido ese carbono atrapado en estas turberas gracias a la temperatura que tenemos. Existe una capa de permafrost que lo tiene tapado. Todo eso se está perdiendo con el calentamiento global. Una vez que ese carbono se libere, se va a duplicar así el carbono que está. Todos los esfuerzos se van a ir. Por eso hay que hacer hoy día la mejor inversión en conservación, si uno quiere aportar a la mitigación del cambio climático, es en mantener las turberas de la mejor calidad posible, los mejores ecosistemas, con mínima intervención, restaurados cuando ya han sido utilizados.
Esas turberas son una razón por las cuales ustedes son optimistas.
Yo creo que sí, tenemos bastante fe de que, bueno, nosotros hace el año pasado se firmó un decreto que las turberas que están dentro del Parque Caruquinca sean solamente con un tema investigativo y no minero. Entonces, todas las turberas que existen dentro de las casi 300.000 hectáreas que tenemos el parque sean de investigación.
Investigación más que nada, sí, porque claro, esto también lo pilla la ley minera, entonces mucha gente que quiere explotarla.
But Caruquinca, like much of Tierra del Fuego, is also the home to one of the most menacing enemies of the South American forest. Beavers are destroying hundreds of thousands of acres of ancient woods. The rodents work in teams to create dams using tree trunks they cut themselves with their own teeth. The resulting floods are mortal to trees not adapted to standing in so much water. They work so fast and reproduce so quickly that they have become one of the biggest environmental threats in the region.
Los bosques como los bosques de Tierra del Fuego igual no son propios para estar inundados o que el castor vaya e inunde cualquier lugar, el bosque sí o sí va a morir. Entonces claro, en Canadá es diferente, los bosques allá sí sobreviven bajo el agua.
O sea, ahí hay equilibrio, aquí no.
Allá, exactamente.
Sí, aquí falta el equilibrio.
The beavers, which are not native to the region, were introduced in 1949 by Argentine President Juan Perón to launch a fur industry. With no natural predators, the beaver population has grown to over 100,000.
El más grande en Canadá, un promedio entre 13 y 15, el más grande 19. Acá nosotros, el más grande 32 y un promedio 20 kilos. Y obviamente lo trajeron a un lugar donde no tiene depredadores. El zorro cumpeo podría ser un depredador, pero yo creo que de los más pequeños. porque el zorro cumpleó en su etapa grande, son 14 kilos
Claro,
200.
y el zorro también es súper oportunista. Entonces no es tan salvaje en matar a algo para comer, sino que es súper oportunista en que si encuentra algo lo va a comer.
Claro.
Entonces prácticamente los depredadores naturales de los castores son los osos, los coyotes, los lobos.
Pero eso en Canadá, obviamente.
Exactamente.
O sea, y lamentablemente eso nos ha llevado a nosotros a tener que evolucionar y convertirnos nosotros, los seres humanos, como depredador de castor.
Claro.
O sea, es la etapa que nos queda, porque lamentablemente es un problema que no es chileno, un problema binacional, es un problema muy grande. Hoy en día me atrevo a decir que tenemos el 80% de las cuencas de agua dulce en Tierra del Fuego contaminadas por castor, o han tenido castoreras o tienen castoreras activas. Entonces es un problema bastante grande que tenemos que empezar a abordar desde ahora. No queremos que el castor salga de Tierra del Fuego, por último combatirlo acá o controlarlo acá.
The rangers say if the beaver population is not controlled, it could decimate forests across the entire southern half of the continent.
Lo más cercano a la realidad para poder decirle al gobierno, decirle a las personas interesadas en esto, cuánto es la cantidad de castores que hay en Tierra del Fuego, y cuánto es la cantidad de castores que puedes encontrar por kilómetro, y cuánto es el valor. Aparte de eso, también con ese mismo estudio podemos sacar la cantidad de horas personas, ya no sé, horas hombre no existe, horas personas, para ver cuánto nos va a costar poder controlar al castor. Porque erradicar, como te explicaba hace un rato, no es posible. El castor ha triunfado en todos los lugares donde hemos hecho sendero en cascada. Aquí no hay castor. Llegas a la laguna que alimenta la cascada y hay castores. O sea, donde vamos hemos encontrado castores. Todavía en Tierra del Fuego no hay un lugar donde no haya ido, donde no me haya encontrado con una represa, con un castor. Entonces, estar en lugares más inimaginables.
Despite the damage from the beavers, the wondrous beauty of Caruquinca nurtures hope.
Mira, yo creo que somos bastante optimistas. ¿Sí? Si no, no estaríamos haciendo lo que estamos haciendo. Creemos mucho en que la gente va a entender de alguna forma lo que nosotros estamos tratando de mostrarles.
Pero estamos a tiempo todavía, ¿o no?
Yo creo que sí. Hay varias generaciones de niños que si les enseñas desde chicos van a aprender y ellos van a seguir con... Es un tema muy importante, muy relevante igual tratar la conservación. De que entiendan el significado de la conservación. Pero yo creo que estamos a tiempo, que estamos bastante motivados para enseñar esto al mundo.
Nosotros creemos de que la educación con los niños es el futuro. Hoy en día estos niños que tú eduques ahora, que si 15 o 10 años más, cuando sean o adolescentes o ya adultos jóvenes, ellos pueden hacer la gran diferencia. Nosotros tenemos que, como nosotros hicimos a perro viejo, nos enseñan nuevos trucos a la gente que ya tiene malas costumbres de no limpiar, de tirar basura, no le vas a enseñar, pero quizás a las nuevas generaciones que vienen más adelante, si nosotros la educamos ahora, esas mismas generaciones más adelante van a poder trabajar con nosotros en conjunto y ayudarnos a hacer conservación o por lo menos mantener nuestros lugares de donde vivamos limpios.
An ageless preserve where, despite it all, nature still has a chance.
Our thanks to Harris Whitbeck for that report. Global investment bank Goldman Sachs acquired Caruquinca's land 10 years ago, then turned it over to the Wildlife Conservation Society.
America's Next.
Finally, we head to the Mallows Bay on the Maryland side of the Potomac River, 30 miles south of Washington, D.C. Hundreds of ships have ended up there, abandoned since the early 20th century. We leave you with images of this vast ship graveyard. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week for another edition of America's Now.